Hello. So I want to talk about one of my favorite bands, the Beatles. I always find it weird when people say they don't like the Beatles. I mean, my brother says he doesn't like the Beatles, and I'm like, what the fuck, dude? It's kind of like saying you don't like water. Like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. But anyways, um, I'm not sure the first time I heard the Beatles. I'm sure I heard them, but I never realized it. But I remember my first memory of it is, and I'm not sure, like all memories when you're younger, you're like, is that a true memory? But anyways, um, the way remember is my mother used to work in Girl Guides, so she'd bring me to all these different events that they would go to. So like I remember I seen Dumb and Dumber in the cinema with them, which was class as a young kid. I must have been about 9. Yeah, I was about 9. I love that movie. But anyways, I digress. And I think we went to a pantomime and they played the Yellow Submarine. And that's my first memory of hearing the Beatles. That's my memory of the first time. And I don't know really if it's true or not. I don't know. But I remember when I kind of got into the Beatles around the time we had gotten Sky, which is like for all you people outside of Ireland and England, Sky was like, it's like a TV provider, service provider. But anyway, it was really expensive back in the day, and we managed to get it for a while. We didn't have it for very long. We had it for a while, but they had like Q. There was a channel on it called Q Music, and they used to always play different types of music, but they always played "Free as a Bird." And I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, "Well, that is class." And then I heard "I'm Only Sleeping" through, I think the Vines did a cover of that. I'm Only Sleeping, and that's when I heard that, and then I went back and but it was. I remember when I first, what blew my mind first of the Beatles was I heard "Tomorrow Never Knows," and I was like, holy shit! Like, I remember going, is that a remix or something? Because it sounded so modern. Like I was only about 16 at the time, 16 or 17, something like that, and I just remember going, holy shit! Like it was so modern. Like it still sounds so modern. It just blew my mind. And from then, I just totally got into the Beatles. I mean, it was just like that was kind of my point of getting into the Beatles more. And like it's funny because I started off with all the later stuff. I never started off with "Please Please Me" and with the Beatles and all that. And obviously, subsequently, I've gone back and not watched, listened to those albums. But it's the older albums that really hold a place for me most. I love those, like from Rubber Soul onwards. I do love the first albums though too. I think I've grown to love them more as I've got older. But I'm kind of more into the experimental stuff aside of the Beatles, and it's amazing though when you think of it. The Beatles went from doing "Please Please Me" to "Revolver." I mean, and it's 3 years. Like it's 3 years, 1963, and then "Revolver" was 1966. So you went from 1963, "Please Please Me," to 1966, "Revolver," and you could even go 1965, "Rubber Soul," which is a great record too. Um, like the Beatles always feel good when I listen to the Beatles. It's like, maybe the world isn't so shit. um, yeah, they just always give me that feeling of like of of that, and bands like the Beatles and the Beach Boys, which I'm sure I'll make a video about too, because the Beatles and the Beach Boys, oh man, it's just they're two bands for me. Um, they always They're such an inspiration with music because they were pushing the boundaries of music, and that's the thing about the Beatles is it was never just Paul and John. Like, yeah, they wrote the bulk of the music, but at the same time, without George Martin and like people like Jeff Emerick and stuff, like Jeff Emerick had the idea of like I think Lennon said he wanted to sound like was it the Dalai Lama or something on a mountaintop, and Jeff Emmerich did it. I think they had this idea of to tie him up with a rope and kind of put him around, like roll him around, not roll him around, spin him around Abbey Road. But then Jeff Emmerich came up with they put him through a Leslie app, that his voice, because it kind of changes halfway through Tomorrow Never Knows. But like Jeff Emmerich was a big part in a lot of those things of like mic and techniques and different things like that. And George Martin. Like George Martin came up with that beautiful string arrangement for Eleanor Rigby, which is very much taken from Psycho Bernard Herrmann. So Beatles are always, I think, the sum of the parts. Like look at Ringo, the drum parts on Strawberry Fields. Like, not many drummers would actually come up with that drum part. And George, look at George Harrison. He wrote some of the best Beatles songs there was, like Something and While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and just so many. So they were a band who were the sum of their parts, and I think why the Beatles have lasted so long is because they started and they finished. That was it. Let It Be, last album, they didn't get back together. Obviously, they've done... The Treatles came back and did Free as a Bird and Real Love. And, I mean, I really like those songs. I know maybe not so much the production on some of the things, but actually I really like the songs. I think they're really cool songs. And I'm really looking forward to this new one that's going to come out now and then, which I've heard the demos of that John did and stuff like that, but I'm very interested to hear what it's going to sound like. But yeah, but back to the point of they finished. It started and it finished, and that's the problem with a lot of bands. They have the tendency to go on too long, and I think sometimes if it ends, humans like that kind of thing of what if this, that, what, like that's why Smile was it's the most famous unfinished album, and I think that's it. Something like that even makes the album bigger than maybe it would be. I don't know, but I kind of like that. There's a thing I like of, I'd love if there was 20 Beatles albums, but it's cool also that there's just, how many is there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 albums. So yeah, I like that there's 12 albums. If there was more, I would have loved it too. But I mean, there's just something in something finishing. It starts and it finishes, because life is like that. Life starts, life ends. And I think if they came back, we'll say, I would have never wanted to hear an 80s Beatles record. Oh my God, could you imagine? Because they'd put that shitty 80s production. There's some 80s production I like, but yeah, I think they'd go for the whole hog of imagine the Beatles with synth keyboards and stuff. Jesus Christ, no. That would just be fucking weird. Yeah, no. So, 70s production would suit Beatles stuff. Early 70s, mid 70s, yeah, that would be cool. But if they reformed, I mean, ifs and buts, if Lennon hadn't been murdered, an 80s Beatles record, Jesus. No, not down with that. But yeah, Beatles, man, I just love the Beatles. I think I'm always kind of going between records, which is my favourite. Which I think it was for a long time. It was Revolver. Revolver's still in there, but then I love Magical Mystery Tour. I know that it's EP. Some people view it as EPs, and then the American version released it as an album. But I always view it as an album. For me, I heard it as an album, so for me, that's an album. I love Magical Mystery Tour. Just some of their greatest songs are on it. Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, All I Need Is Love. Some great songs on that. But the one album I always didn't like, and I actually got into it during the time when they put it out, like they remixed the album. I don't know, was it 2018 or whatever it was? But any time when they put the White Album, it's the White Album. Um, I never really liked the White Album because I thought there was a lot of great songs on it, but I thought it could have been one album. I probably still think that, but I really got into it when that remix came out for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I always hated Beatles stereo mixes because like I cannot listen to drums on one side of of a record. It just drives me daft. So if you're going to listen to the White Album, mostly I would say listen to it in mono. But the stereo remix that came out, they did, you know, they managed to have it a bit more modern sound of placement of instruments and drums, and yeah, there is some of that stuff with drums being side, but whatever. Um, and yeah, that record's really grown in my heart. Like I love Honey Pie. I know I don't think people like that song, but I like those McCartney where he tries those kind of more, what would you call it, vaudevillian. Um, there's a word for it, and I can't think of the fucking word. Um, Music hall, yeah. So those kind of music hall stuff of in England, the 50s, 40s, 50s, 30s, 40s, whatever. I like that kind of stuff. So there's, yeah, the White Album's grown on me a lot. But yeah, Sergeant Pepper's class too, but it's never really one I reach to. But yeah, I think actually A Hard Day's Night, of their like early records, we'll say pre Rubber Soul, I think A Hard Day's Night and maybe Help might be their best of them. Like I kind of see the Beatles as like, there's like two halves of the Beatles. There's like from Please Please Me to Help, and then there's from Rubber Soul to Let It Be. Like that's the way I kind of view. There's those two sections of the Beatles that, for me anyway. But yeah, I just love the Beatles. I just love. I love how the records still sound modern in their own way, and just the creativeness that they went through. Like there's not many bands who could be a pop band. Like imagine One Direction suddenly, if they were still around, like what, 5 albums in, start to get like psychedelic shit. First off, they probably wouldn't sell any records in the current climate. But the fact that Beatles didn't give a shit, and I think back then in the 60s you were given more room to experiment. You know, it was like it was of the time that you could do that, and people were like, yeah, let's do this. Whereas now the music business is so kind of, this is what a hit is, and there's no room for anything outside that, which is sad. I mean, in the commercial sense of music. But yeah, the Beatles always make me feel good. Like I'm always trying to, like any book that comes out, I'm always reading about. I know loads about the Beatles, but I'm always reading stuff, and that's the cool thing about the Beatles. There's someone always uncovering some little anecdote or something like that, and yeah, that's it. The Beatles, fuck yeah.